Hey everyone, this is Austin Schur here with We Write About Music, and today I am speaking with Nick Stevens from Hyde Park. He's just released a stellar EP called This Is Just a Simple Song, and I am super excited to talk to him all about it. Nick, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. What is new in the life of Nick Stevens? How is the Brooklyn life treating you?
Well, right now it's like it's one of those like weird days in the middle of February where it's 50 out and it's like you can just feel spring coming, but it's
Are you past the worst of it? I got a lot of family in that area, and I've only heard negative things.
uh probably not. there's always like
Probably.
there's
Okay.
always like this lull in February where things are you get like a couple of warm days and then you're always good for like one or two more
Sure.
blizzards by the end of the month. So if it were like this at the beginning of March, I'd say we're probably past the worst of it, but
Okay. It's the calm
yeah,
before the storm. Something's
exactly.
looming in the background.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Well, I didn't bring you on to talk about the weather, even though I'm interested in it. I want to talk about this EP. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
There's so many cool elements to it, and it's just got a really unique sound, in my opinion. But the first thing I really want to talk about is what is it about? Is there like an overarching message, or is each song an individual story? How does it work?
Yeah, it's a little of both. I think it's one of those things that the whole idea for it, these are all songs that I had written over, I don't know, about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and it was one of those things where I just kind of like piecemealed a bunch of stuff together. And so I think they all have the kind of central element of things like, heartbreak, relationships, turmoil, all the
The good
great stuff
stuff.
that songs are about. Yeah.
Of course.
Not a very, not a very like optimistic EP, I guess, in a lot of ways. But yeah, so they're all they all kind of retain that central theme, the idea of dealing with turbulent relationships. But I think what was interesting about it was when I had the idea to actually go and record these about a year ago. I was sitting around. I think I pulled out my guitar and I just every now and then I'll pull out and play some old songs for the hell of it. And
Yeah.
what's interesting about them is they're all really simple songs, hence the title of the EP, which is This Is Just a Simple Song. So they're all these songs that are, three, four, maybe five chords. They're really simple, verse structures. There's nothing crazy about them. But when we went and we arranged them and we kind of put all these different sonic textures and colors around it, they all became something completely different. And so I think that was kind of the theme of it, was taking something that's a very simple song and trying to make something that's a little bit more ornate and sound more regal. And Drew Bly, who was my producer, who co-produced it with me, we talked about the idea of like an art gallery, and like the idea that
Okay.
you're in this, you can be in this building where none of it's an exhibition. Every single song is its own kind of painting or own piece of art, where it's
Sure.
a very different different textures and different sonic palette, what have you. But the whole work kind of stands on that unifying theme. So uh, yeah, I'd say that's yeah. I would love to be able to tell you that there's some like underlying lyrical theme beyond that, but
Doesn't
that
need to
really is
be.
it. Yeah, it just kind of happened.
I have to assume that there's a connection to the Shins here in some capacity.
Yeah, that's it to some degree. I love me some James Mercer, but
Who doesn't?
it's one of those things that yeah, it's one of those things that I found interesting as I've been kind of going through and doing doing a lot of uh, exposure, I guess would be the right word for it,
Sure,
of
sure.
those songs. But I've heard the Shins, I've heard Bare Naked Ladies a couple of times, which I know one song by the Bare Naked Ladies, so that one always throws me for a loop.
So yeah, does
Uh,
anyone know more than one song but Bare Naked Ladies? Sorry.
Supposedly, what's the it's on Community, where they have that one bit about Bare Naked Ladies being like
Yes,
the premier alt Canadian rock
right. It's
band
my
of the
favorite show of all time, like any drama, comedy, anything.
well
Yeah,
we'll
good
save
old
part two of this for
yeah,
Community, and
good old
then
BNL. That's
um
fantastic.
but yeah, I think the one thing the Shins is interesting. I kind of he has such a well, I have to say he now. I guess it's his solo project after he kicked everybody out. But
Sure.
like that idea of just kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
having intricate layers that all come together, like everything is very precisely arranged. And I think
yeah.
that's what we tried to do, kind of make it work like a Swiss clock and then put it back together. So maybe taking that, but yeah, beyond that, I wish I could play like simple song. That'd be fun. But
That's
actually, I
okay.
think that's where I took the title of the EP from, was from
That's mainly why. It's not even so much in sound, but like I mean, I see Port of Morrow behind you, and
oh yeah,
you know, the wall.
these are my influences.
I
For
understand. I actually recently just moved and I had the same wall of records that I haven't yet put back up, but
yeah.
in time. Now, before we started recording, you had mentioned some of your collaborators and producers on this record, and
Mhm.
it would be a shame if you didn't shout them out because as much as this is technically a solo project, it's
Mhm.
not just you, and everyone deserves credit. So please.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Drew Bly, who I've known for a really long time. We went to school together, and when I had the idea to do this, he was my first call. I just, was going through these. I was like, "Hey, you want to make a record together and see what happens?" And he, it's funny because Drew, his main project right now is this band called Shagahad, which is much more like heavy progressive metal, like the complete polar opposite from anything
Yeah.
that I do.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. And so he helped me produce it, played bass, did some of the horn and string arrangements, did a lot of work on it. Chris Anthony, who I jokingly refer to as my longest suffering musical colleague, because I had done false starts of recordings for all of these
Sure.
songs over a number of years, and he went into the studio a couple of times with me, and we laid down drum tracks, and I didn't release it for one reason or another. Um, so he played all the drums and percussion on it, and is just he's a fantastic sounding board and really helps give it some grit on some of the tracks, like the
I
Insomniac's
understand.
Lament, that drum track that he does. And his brother, Dave Anthony, played guitar on a bunch of things. He has this fantastic solo on one of the tracks called The Artist that he came in and just completely changed that track, and does a bunch of backing vocals, and just a fantastic guy to have around during this entire process too. So he performed on a bunch of stuff. Evan Lynch, who's a cellist who I met middle to end of last year, he played on a bunch of stuff, did that solo on the Insomniac's Lament. So they're the main collaborators, and then my friend Dan Moffat, who helped with some of the engineering and production and the mastering on it. Yeah, and then have some other collaborators here and there, but that's the main stable of artists that kind of help put this together.
Awesome. Everyone did an obviously amazing job, but do you feel that you're sort of like, I don't know if this is the right word, like the puppet master in the sense of it? Like, are you directing people or are you letting them have their liberty to kind of do whatever they want, as long as it fits
I
the band?
I would love to hope it's the second one. If it's
Yeah, of course. Just
but
like, do
no,
what I say.
no. Well, I had a when I because I had bands in college, and I had a
Sure,
solo
sure.
act when I was in college, which my ego was way outsized in college.
Awesome.
But and so I think I didn't want to do that because I had like very ideas of like, this is the precise arrangement I want. I want it to sound
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
like
yeah.
this. Now the approach that I take for these sorts of things is I have a general idea of the vibe that I'm going for, but we'll go into the studio, and I let people just kind of do their thing, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I have opinions. I'll go and say,
Of
I don't
course.
like this,
Your
do like
name is
this.
on it.
Well,
Um,
yeah, a name is on it that
a
I'm
name.
associated with.
That's understandable.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of want to like get into your head just a little bit, as weird as that sounds. But are you the type of artist that is always looking towards the future in terms of what you want to make? Like, do you ever stop and only work on one project at a time? Like will you limit yourself?
Uh, I do look to the future. I think it's been interesting during this whole production process because
Sure.
we did it over the course of about a year of putting
Okay.
everything together. And I've had this idea, so an album that I'm kind of writing in the background, which is all about people stealing art and why people steal art, which is about as esoteric a topic as I can come up with for an album.
Sure.
But uh, so I try to, it's one of those things I do try to focus on the task at hand and try to focus on one thing, but my
Yeah,
mind always kind of goes into other places. So I've got a notebook somewhere in my office that
I
has
understand.
like all my lyrical ideas. And yeah, so I try to, it just never works out well. I feel like it's one of those things that if you try to limit yourself to one thing at any given time, you miss out on a lot of opportunity
Totally.
to try to write and follow things that could be really interesting.
Do you find yourself wanting to experiment in the future? Like, I love the sound particularly, but an artist has to grow, an artist has to evolve in some sense. Like, what do you think? for the future?
EDM. That's really my my pure my purest desire is to be an EDM artist. No.
You know,
Uh
you might be kidding, but like, hey,
I realize I have to always clarify this because you and I just met. I have an absurdly dry sense of humor. So
it's okay. I can take
no,
it.
I no, I it's interesting because I think like as I've been going through this, my sound has evolved quite a bit. When I
Okay,
first started writing all these songs, they were folk songs, like just me on an acoustic guitar and
sure.
playing. Like I wanted it to be like I wanted to have like a David Gray esque or a Nick Drake esque kind of sound, like a folk sound with maybe some electronic elements,
Yeah,
which more the David Gray sound. But
sure.
over time, I think it's I got more comfortable with doing some electronic influences, playing electric instrumentation. It's like I went through the whole folk rock movement in about 2 years. But yeah, I think in terms of the types of things I want to experiment with, I like the electronic part is interesting for me. I think even as I was preparing, I've got a gig that I'm playing a solo gig tonight, and I'm doing a lot of looping and a lot of things
Nice.
that a couple of years ago I never would have done. But as part of that, there's a lot of like heavy drum machine, a lot of heavy synth sounds that actually do have some of the EDM kind of influences to it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. If I find a sound that I like, I'll try to mess with it and try to grab stylistic elements. Try to make something a little bit different. I never want to be like doing the same thing,
No, no,
every
no, of
single
course
record
not.
or yeah.
But I also feel like as much experimentation as possible is not always the best. I particularly like when it comes to an EP or an album experience, I'm all about the cohesiveness. I want to like kind of lose myself in it a little bit and feel like the first song is somehow linked to the last song and that there's, like similar elements in the middle. And I feel that this delivers on that. So like as much as there are different things happening stylistically, it still kind of finds itself throughout.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things. Like, it's very much a pop record. It's a pop EP,
Sure.
and there's a lot of those kind of core elements. There's a lot of piano. There's a lot of like very not chorusy, but like very a lot of reverb on guitar kind of sound. Like
Sure,
that, those kind of
sure.
elements. But
Yeah, yeah.
it is fun to have like a disparate sound going from something like Guy and Girl, which is more of like a piano four to the floor kind of driven ballad, to
Yeah.
something like The Artist, which is my best my best take at trying to emulate Peter Gabriel. So it's like it's fun doing those. Yeah, I if I think the person that I like in terms of the way I think about evolution as an artist and the types of things that I would want to do, Dan Behar with Destroyer, like that's the kind of thing that I would want to follow,
Totally.
where like every record has that central, that central sound, and there's a lot of
Sure.
those central elements. So you listen to things like Kaput, and then you go to what was the most recent one, Have We Met, where it's much more heavier electronic sound, kind of the furthest thing away from that
Totally.
loungy jazz kind of sound, but it's still got a lot of those kind of, the thing that stays the same are the lyricism, the songwriting structure, like those sorts of things. So
Of
that's the kind
course.
of evolution I'm interested in.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you have been putting this together for a few years now. That's correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so was there anything along the way that sort of surprised you? Like something that really stood out and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen during this 3 year process?
Yeah, I think there's two things. The songs that kind of transform the most, the ones that surprised me the most over from the time that I wrote them to the time that they ended up on the EP.
Sure.
The Artist and Heathcliff at the Prom, I think, are the two. Heathcliff at the Prom is one that I wrote originally as like it's like a very Magnetic Fields, dirgy kind of song. Like I wrote it, like doing a Stephen Merritt impersonation and trying to sing in a baritone voice.
I
And
understand.
what surprised me was, like I had conversations with Drew where I was trying to, he challenged me to think about like trying to put some of these songs in a bit of a different context. And that one ended up becoming this like Last Dance at the Prom kind of song. It's got like a much bouncier kind of,
Yeah.
I think somebody threw out the word McCartney-esque when we were producing it, and which may or may not be true, but like it surprised me, the ability to take one song, and this is one of the benefits of having songs that are very simple,
Yeah.
the ability to go and take a song and then turn it into something completely different and play it in like 3 or 4 different lights. I think that surprised me, just how malleable the music that I've been putting together is.
Right.
And I, I think I surprised myself with that ability to not just be so cemented to one style or one feel of it, to be able to experiment. And that's something I don't know that I would have done 5 years ago. I would have been much more like,
It's
no, I
awesome.
wrote it this way, I'm performing it this way, nothing is changing.
Totally. No, and listen, I say this all the time. Like, I don't make music. I'm a very amateur guitarist. But if I was to start making music, I feel that I would be you in the past. I would have a vision for something, and if it didn't go to that, no matter the outcome, I would probably be disappointed with it. I
Yeah.
think there's a certain control aspect of like, you care so much about it, you're putting so much time and effort, you want it to come out how you envision it. And it's like
Yeah.
when you start letting go, you can kind of find those fun parts and loosen up, and you never know what happens. And then it happens.
Yeah, it's been. I think it's also like going back to the conversation we had about
Yeah,
collaborators, right? I think it's one of those things that you wall yourself off so much when you try to like stick to your like you need to have some kind of north star and some kind of way of thinking
sure,
about,
sure.
here's how this is the general vibe I want to go for. But then opening yourself up to collaborators and bringing stuff in, like The Artist is one of those examples of a song that Drew and I, when we were first piecing it together, I had a general idea of the vibe that I wanted, which was like, this very ethereal kind of tone to it. And then we had no idea what, like, how it should come together. And that song only came together through the collaboration with Dave playing that guitar part, with Chris laying down the rhythm and taking all those different parts and putting it together. And I never would have finished that song had it not been for trying to kind of meld that vision together and trying to work with other people and opening myself up to collaboration.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the irony is you never really get to realize your vision unless you can actually do it all yourself, which I cannot. By any stretch of the imagination, I am
I
hopeless as
understand.
many things. So
Okay, so then now that you've been through this process, like you've gone from the thinking about what type of record I'm gonna making or to make, to actually like clicking the submit button, was there something that you enjoyed the most about the entire process?
hmm uh I mean, clicking the submit button was pretty gratifying on its own.
I'm sure of it.
I think it was just the idea that taking things that were really just sketches, and fleshing them out into something much more gratifying, and the ability to really transform these songs. I think that for me was it, going. I went back a while ago to try to listen to like how we started them, and I listened back to like some of the demos, and
Sure.
you listen to those, and they're just like these loopy kind of things, and they're loopy in the sense that like not like crazy,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
um
I understand.
yeah, but like I remember going back because it was about a year ago that we started doing the recordings, and then
Right.
I think going through that process and just going from here's the starting point, here's where we started, melding everything, just listening to all the different iterations, then being able to go and put that onto a record. I think just the entire process was so gratifying for me. It's hard for me to focus in on any one element in a lot of ways because it all just kind of, um, I think just the process was kind of overwhelming in a lot of ways. And so it's hard for me sometimes to parse out, like, I really love this one guitar part, or I really love this, these, I, yeah, I honestly don't know that I could put my finger on it aside from just the entire process was really gratifying, which I
That's
realize is not
okay.
the answer you want, but
Listen, there's no right answers in any of it. Like, so much of it is guessing and getting lucky and figuring things out on the fly, so it doesn't
yeah.
really matter.
I
Uh,
I mean, I went to this is one of the I was hoping when I would go and put this together to be like some kind of rubric or some kind of answer key
dude,
to putting
yeah.
it together, but unfortunately unfortunately not.
No, that's too bad.
Yeah. Bad joke
Well,
falling over. Let's go. Let's
all
move
good.
on.
So, what is the next year of your life looking like?
Next year of my life. Well,
Doesn't even
hopefully
have to include music. Just maybe you as a person or just kind of just life in general.
uh yeah, I think a lot of it now is just trying to so I moved to New York about 6 months before the pandemic started, which
Perfect timing.
yeah, exactly. So I think the next year, I'm hoping it involves a lot of just kind of getting out back into the world, playing shows again. I have
Yeah.
this. I'm doing my first show tonight in 7 years. It's been
Oh,
such a
holy
long
shit. I
time.
thought this was like a regular thing that was
Oh
happening and it was
no, 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 no. The part of the challenge is that moving away from Boston, most of my collaborators
sure, sure.
are still in Boston. So
Oh man.
um so hopefully getting some gigs together. I think just trying to give myself more space, like, and it is related to music because it is such a huge part of my life. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
giving myself more space to write, and one of the biggest challenges I think I've had is um that I suffer from a lot of writer's block, and I'll go and like I have these great ideas for songs, at least I think they're great. But whenever I go to try to write them, there's always a challenge of like trying to put something down on paper. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that when you write a song, no matter how non-autobiographical it may seem, there's always a kernel of you in there, and there's some truth there. You can't write a good song without putting some part of yourself into it. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had is being vulnerable and being open. And the moments where I've been able to do that sometimes are fleeting. And so what I'm trying to work on for myself is being okay, being more vulnerable to help just in my general, my life, just being a more empathetic and compassionate person than I already am, but also trying to open myself up to sharing more of who I am with the world. I think I was listening to the Midnight Organ Fight by Frightened Rabbit. This is like a year ago when I started recording
Sure.
this, and it was just one of those things like, it's like, God damn it, I wish that I could be that open and like that, um, be willing to show like some level of pain or some
Sure.
level of. I just wish I could do that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to work on for the next year is just trying to find ways to be okay being a more vulnerable person at times. I can do it, and obviously, writing the songs and the stuff that is on the EP,
No, of
I
course.
have, yeah, I have done that, but it's doing it more and being okay with just putting myself out there. So
Actually, I really like that answer, mainly because I think that there's so much like manufacturing happening in music right now, where it's where like people, they write about topics that they have no knowledge on, but it's catchy and people will sing the hook and blah blah blah.
yeah,
But for like legitimate music listeners who make the effort to listen to lyrics and listen to stories, which I hate to say it seems like a dying breed, but there are people out there that, they actually want to listen to ultimately strangers' stories. There's a genuineness that comes through. And
yeah,
that's the realest part of music is, you're opening the door to your life and being just an open person. And I think that's a great thing to work on.
yeah. One of the interesting things, so as part of the album that I'm writing, which is the collection of stories about art heists,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell, as I'm writing those songs, I'm trying to tell stories about uh, why people steal art, which is something I have no direct experience with, and they are stories, right? A lot of it is,
Sure.
well, yeah, but like a lot of, one story about a father stealing a piece of art to reconnect with his estranged daughter, right? Something that I have no direct experience with because I
No.
have no kids. I've never stolen a painting, like
No.
none of
No,
these
no,
types of
no.
things. I
Relatively
should
tame life.
and I should clarify, I'm not planning to do any of this, but
Yeah. Just get that out right now.
yeah, get that out now. So yeah, again, like a story that I have no direct experience with, but there's
Sure.
always that kind of like kernel of truth to it. Like for me, it's painful to write that song because in a lot of ways I've struggled with it because I grew up, my parents got divorced. I think there's a lot of that kind of idea of resenting a parent for getting divorced, and so in even though the song is not directly about me or my experience, it's a made up story. That core emotion of like trying to reconnect and the loneliness that a child might feel in it, that for me, I think that's the part that's like I want to push myself to write those types of songs and be more vulnerable in doing that.
Totally understand.
Yeah,
Nice, man. Nick, I have one more question for you at this point,
go
and I
for it.
just want to say before we start finishing up, this has been an awesome conversation. So I'll just get
Yeah,
that out in the open. Basically, the question though is for the person that is going to discover you from this, And for the person that's going to listen to your music for the first time, what is an opening message that you'd like to say to them?
Oh man, you're going right for the deep stuff.
Oh yeah, finish it out on a super deep note.
uh, I would just say that hmm, you have to cut out like 5 minutes of silent audio for this. No, I
Really adds to the drama of it.
the opening message I think is just listen to it multiple times, and I hope that when you listen to it, that you can find multiple layers into it, that you can find multiple avenues in it, and that you can find some level of solace or some level of like finding some kernel of yourself in it, right? Like I said, the songs are all about the turbulence of relationships, and like whether it's a really extreme one, like guy and girl with the single off of it, which I forgot to mention with collaborators. My girlfriend Mary Stottle also sang on that one. But
Nice.
um the the idea that you can that there you're I'm gonna back this up a little bit. There's always the idea that with I feel like with relationships in particular, like the idea that there's this notion of a perfect relationship out there,
Sure.
that there's a nice balance of loving and caring. No such thing exists. And so I think this is one way of also kind of looking at it and saying that hopefully you can find some solace in the fact that whatever challenges you find in your relationship, and in the way that you relate to the world, that there's a mirror and there's something in there to help find solace. And also
Totally.
just you can find that on multiple listens, I hope. um yeah.
No, no,
I was
no.
I was trying to stick the landing, and I don't
It's
know that I did it,
okay.
but
Well, because there's no right answer, and I think that people should have a preface before they start listening. So I'm gonna plug you one more time. The EP is called "This Is Just a Simple Song." The project is called Hyde Park, and this is Nick Stevens, obviously. But I sincerely want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. This has been great, and it's served as the perfect background for an EP that needs it. So thank you.
thank you. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it.
And you're the first person I've talked to that has mentioned community in an interview, which is a definite plus in my book. So, yeah, Nick, have an amazing rest of your weekend, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you so much,
Bye
Austin.
bye.
Bye now.